Well, good morning, everybody. A very warm welcome to this Rare Dementia Support Carer meeting. My name is Seb Crutch, and I'm one of the psychologists at Rare Dementia Support and the Dementia Research Centre at UCL, who has the privilege of working with some of the lovely people you're going to be seeing on your screen today, and with you all as we try to work to support those of you living with or supporting someone living with a rare form of dementia. We are very, very conscious that these are not easy times. Many of you will have been not having easy times for a very long period of your lives, but this has been really compounded by loneliness, isolation, lack of services, and the many other things besides. So we're very conscious that a lot of you will have struggled to make it along today, but we're very, very glad to see you. We're sorry we can't be, as always, welcoming you with a warm embrace, a warm cup of coffee, and a chat beforehand, and that we're all in our different places. But we hope that you will find this a space that's welcoming and friendly, and where you can ask questions and hear from people, perhaps with similar experiences to you, or with opinions that will hopefully be helpful or will prompt a thought or a reflection in yourself. Acknowledging those very tough times, and especially for those of you separated from loved ones in care or residential facilities, or those of you, any of us, who are losing and lacking the usual support and friends that we rely on. All of that said and acknowledged, we are also really grateful to all of you who've been sharing positive and encouraging stories about how you've been coping. Many of you, from the conversations I've been privileged to be involved in, have been displaying, to my mind, absolutely remarkable resilience and creativity through everything you're going through, both not only to support your loved one, but also to keep yourself as well as you can in these current times. And so, although we're not with you in person today, as always, I'd like to remind you that Nikki, Claire, Livy, Hannah, and the rest of the direct support team are always happy to hear from you. We meet in these group meetings, and that's historically been what Rare Dementia Support does. But we also very much now have one-to-one support and small groups that we'd like to offer you. And so please do avail yourself, and please don't, if you've got a need, if you've got some help, or if you need some help, or if you just need someone to talk to, and we would be only too pleased to hear from you, only too pleased. Before we get on with our exciting agenda of talks and questions and other opinions from both members of the RDS team and members such as yourselves, I thought I'd just give you a few brief updates about a few of the things that have been happening at Rare Dementia Support over the past few months. We're very grateful that we've had some coronavirus response funding, and so a number of people who you'll be meeting a bit later in the meeting have been working particularly on establishing these new small groups, so trying to give ourselves intimate themed discussions whilst we're not able to meet physically together. And several members of the team, you'll meet Trish in particular later on, who have joined us to try and think more about rights and entitlements, how to help you know when to challenge and know when you get it, when you ask for a service or a type of support, and to know what you're entitled to, and how we can help you to try and access the support that is there. We're also really pleased to be working on developing an online forum to go in a private member area on the RDS website, and that's an attempt to work or bridge the gap between the central support that we try to offer and the many fantastic Facebook groups and other online communities that exist out there already, for you to find friends, people going through similar situations at a similar time, and for us to be able to interact with and partner with those sorts of communities, and to try to answer the questions that come up, and try and be as supportive as we can of those wider communities, not just in the UK, but in many countries across the world. We're also really pleased that in the past few weeks we've been able to launch some new groups, particularly including a group for young adults who are looking after a parent with a rare form of dementia. So I'm sure that will apply to many of you, that you've got children or young relatives 18 to 35-ish who are very involved in supporting a parent or other relative with a rare dementia. And so that's a new group, a new small community that's forming, which may be, if that's appropriate to you or someone you know, we'd love to hear from you so we can tell you more about that. And we'd also be really pleased that in the next few months, Nikki and a wonderful colleague, Jackie Nunn, will be leading the launch of a new young onset Alzheimer's disease group. So obviously there's a lot of people who have Alzheimer's disease diagnosed before the age of 65, many of whom have been very involved in research in the clinics at Queen Square and in other places across the UK and further afield. And it's going to be a great privilege to be able to bring some of those people together and to form a new support community. Now, just before I invite Nikki up to join me on the screen, or maybe I think she's already here, to talk about the agenda for today. The other thing I wanted to mention to all of you and to ask for your feedback and help with is a suggestion we'd like to make about this meeting. I'm not sure if it probably won't feel like it because we're all sat individually in our own homes or places, but there's about 140 odd at least people in this meeting at the moment, and we're aware, of course, in all that we do, the one-to-one support, the small groups and the large groups, we're aware that all of you have different experiences, not just because of the different dementias you're living with and the different stages that you're at, but because you're different people with different lives, different interests, different passions. And so all of what we want to do is to provide tailored and appropriate support for you. And some of the feedback we've had from this meeting in previous sessions has suggested that it's perhaps difficult for us to do that when we have one carer meeting which is trying to speak to the situations of so many people in so many different circumstances. So what we'd like to suggest for the next few months is that we try dividing this meeting into an early stage meeting, into an early stage carer meeting and a later stage carer meeting. Now, I need to be really clear, we are not attaching any fixed definitions to early and late. It is up to you to decide. We will try and communicate as clearly as we can about the sorts of topics and conversations we'll be having in those two meetings. And it's up to you to decide whether you want to come to one or maybe even to both. That's completely fine. It's the flexible choice up to you. The reason we're doing this is to try to make it clear, make spaces where people feel they can talk about issues that are relevant to them without fear of or feeling that they can't say what's on their hearts or their minds because of one thinking it might not be appropriate for someone else. So we want to be able to have encouraging sessions talking about activities that people, for example, who've just been diagnosed will find really helpful and supportive. But equally, we don't want those sorts of conversations to be difficult or distressing for someone perhaps who's caring for a loved one who's got a much more advanced form of dementia for whom that sort of situation or activity just isn't appropriate. So it won't be a perfect mix. Obviously, within the broad categories of early and late, there will of course still be huge variability, but this is our attempt, initial attempt to try to provide a more tailored fit for some of the conversations and to try and invite along members like yourselves to contribute to these meetings, as you'll hear in some of the recorded conversations later, to talk of your experiences in a way that will chime and ring true to other people at a similar stage. I just also say that we are also very keen to complement and build on the support we have for people in the middle and later stages of their dementia. And as part of that, Claire and Nikki will be leading a new small group conversation series of 7 or 8 sessions, which is very geared towards people dealing with specific issues appropriate for people living in the later stages. And that will be part of, you'll hear more about that in the next couple of weeks when we send out our first brochure of rare dementia support services, so you can see everything that we offer together and can try and decide what's appropriate to you and indicate to us what kind of services you're interested in, but more of that later. So for now, thank you again so much for being with us today. I'm going to hand over to my wonderful colleague, Nikki Zimmerman, to tell you a bit more about the rest of this meeting. Nikki.
Thank you, Seb, and hello to everybody. It's great to be here in this virtual meeting again, and as I say every time, this year. I miss seeing all of you coming up the stairs to our lovely building at the Welcome Centre, and seeing all your smiling faces and spending sort of that special time that we always have together. But we've been working really hard behind the scenes to see what we can bring to you for these meetings, and I'm absolutely delighted today that we've got some really special experiences to share with you. And we're going to start off this morning with a fantastic conversation between my lovely colleague Claire and Brady, who's with us today. Brady has been a member with RDS for a while, and she's attended some of our groups, and she's going to be sharing her experiences today of caring for her husband, living with a husband who has frontotemporal dementia. She is an absolutely inspiring lady, and we are so grateful for her sharing her experience today. After that, we're going to be you're going to be listening to me again, I'm afraid. you're going to have my conversation that I've had recently with Elaine Eager. I've known Elaine for a while. She again is been a member with RDS for a long time now, and she looks after her husband Paul, who's living with logopenic aphasia. Paul's in a care home, and it's obviously been a really difficult time with COVID, and Elaine is going to also be sharing her experience. We're then going to go on to have an update from the direct support team. As Seb said, we've had a really busy year, and we've made lots of changes. We've got new staff in, and we've really developed a lot this year. So Livy, Hannah and Trish will be giving you an update today. And then it comes to the really important time of question time. So please do send your questions in. On the panel today, there's going to be myself, Elaine and Brady, and Ida, who came to one of the carers groups a little while ago, our very valued colleague, and Trish as well. So please, if you've got any questions, send them in now, and we'll be answering those later today for you. Thank you very much. And we're going to see, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to go on to the first interview that we did with Brady and Claire now.
So hello everyone, I'm delighted to be here today with the lovely Brady. So Brady supports her husband Joe, who has a diagnosis of FTD. And today we're going to talk through some of the difficulties that Joe has and the strategies that Brady has put in place to both support and empower Joe. So thank you so much for being here today, Brady. I wonder if we could start by you talking us through the first signs that you noticed that something maybe wasn't quite right with Joe.
All right, Claire. It has to be one day. There was one day in November. It was November 2012. It was actually 8 years ago. We were sitting down to our evening meal, and I had got fish from the local fish shop, and I had cooked the fish, and I was sitting opposite Joe, and we were eating away, the two of us, and I said to Joe, this fish is beautiful today. It's really nice. And he said, yeah, it is nice, but there's a lot of stones in mine. And instead of bones, he said stones. And oh my goodness, that impacted me so much. It was profound, really. I just found it incredible. Did he really say that? And I looked across at him, and he didn't even know he had said it. And like, I knew immediately there was something wrong with Joe's brain. But you know, at the same time, as profound as the moment was, I have to say I had this feeling that this was not just isolated, because there had been a pattern. Now, there were small changes, but in terms of Joe's personality, they were quite big, I guess, now in reality. So I suppose even at that time, I was thinking of the previous couple of years, and like where Joe was at work, he was working for the same company for over 20 years. and he really loved his job, and it was very natural to him, and he was very valued there, and it was just a very nice work environment for him. We started coming home and saying, they're putting a lot of stress on me, I'm not able for this job, I want to leave. And I thought, this is very, very unusual for Joe, but maybe things are changing, and I just took it on board that it was the work climate. And then personally as well, I did notice Joe, like he would have been a very affectionate man, and in an intimate way and everything, but all that changed. So that was extremely unusual. So he did obviously have a problem with his libido, and that was a completely new thing for us. And he had actually acknowledged it himself and had started to go to the GP about his tiredness, about the stress, and about all that. So that had preceded this. And in a way, really, it was kind of when the GP, we did go back to the GP as a couple the next day, because Joe had a repeat of the same thing of the loss of words. And the GP had seen him previously for blood tests. So he did mention it could be early dementia. And really, as difficult as it was to hear, I kind of recognised something, a pattern. So that was that, Claire. That's what happened.
Yeah, thank you so much for describing those changes. I think other people will definitely have experienced similar things at the start of the diagnosis process. I wonder if you could tell us a bit about the difficulties that Joe has now and the strategies that you have in place to support him with those difficulties.
Like that, Joe, the initial difficulties were word finding, comprehension, social withdrawal, decision making, all of those things. Now all of those have become more embedded. Like his speech difficulty, he is almost non-verbal. We still communicate very well, actually, but he would just have words rather than a sentence. He is very creative. He always was. His line of work was maintenance, and he has lots of skills in that area. So in the initial stages of his diagnosis, he was in the shed. He has this shed at the end of the garden. He would make things with like carpentry and all of that. But after a few years, I began to worry about the tools, how powerful they were, and really I was worried about his safety. So somebody suggested he make models. So he started making matchstick models. So he spent years making those. He has his own, what we call his museum, because he keeps them, all the models. So he has his own space indoors. And he went from making matchstick models to air-fixed. Once he has instructions, he can assemble anything. He went on to do Lego, and lots of different things in that area. So really it's about, I started to instigate really and initiate all those things, and he fell in with all of that. And in other ways we kind of set up things for like that he'd get walking, and so that they'd be a healthy aspect to the day. Like those things, I felt once I initiated them, he came on board. And when something becomes the norm, like a routine, he automatically continues. Once he feels up to it, he will be more than willing to join in. Yeah.
Absolutely, that's wonderful to hear about the positive things that he's engaging in, and that love for construction and building that he has as well. And you've also talked before about the importance of kind of working with him in the things that he enjoys, and how maybe at the start, you were trying to kind of put things in place that he was a bit resistant to. I wonder if you could describe a little bit more about that change in your support process for him.
I think really it was myself, really, Claire, in that I initially, when we got the diagnosis, I couldn't accept it. I found it very, very difficult. And I was also very, very sad. We had lost everything really that we planned for, and Joe's health and that. So I did resist, and I suppose then I was trying to change Joe's behaviour, and I was impatient, and that put him under more stress. And I realised then really that once I accepted, I came to a level of acceptance that I was able to actually show up for his needs. I was able to, we'd work together, because for him really respecting his space, his own space, was very important. And he had, like, his desires, he had very specific needs, and really once those needs were met and he was allowed and given the choice to choose the things, I think it automatically created that kind of a calm environment for him, and he settled into a kind of a very relaxed and fulfilling way, in a way that he had a purpose in the day, and it seemed to work very well for him. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you've really, really wonderfully described the way that you've supported Joe to meet his needs and to empower him as well. What you found helpful that you've had directly for yourself?
I suppose initially I did think I was coping all right, but I do remember, we went on a holiday early on, and I remember being on the plane coming home, and all of a sudden I couldn't breathe. I was completely anxious, and I thought, oh my goodness, what's happening to me? And it was actually that I think I was coming home, what I was facing at home, and it was my body telling me I wasn't coping at all. Really, I suppose it was like a panic, really. So when I came home from that holiday, I knew I had to get help. So I went to my GP, and she suggested I get a counsellor. And through that, really, I remember her saying to me, she said, Joe will be all right. You know, Joe will be okay, but you'll be there for Joe, who will be there for you. And it kind of put me thinking of my own needs. That was first. And then I started, I suppose I started doing personal development, and I did a few courses on caring for your well-being and grief, loss and change. And I think through all that, then I found a kind of a self-nurturing, and I really enjoyed those courses, and it gave me an appreciation for my life and the ability for me to choose and make my choices in life. And I think I felt more for Joe and his loss, and it just seemed to turn a corner for me, and that's what worked for me anyway. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think what you said about getting that support for yourself is so important, and something that's often overlooked when you are caring for someone else, but it's so much harder to care for yourself when you are caring as well. So that's an important thing to focus on, definitely. So I know that a lot of people affected by rare dementias have found the COVID-19 restrictions really, really difficult. And I know that that's impacted on you and Joe as well. So would you be able to talk a bit about how that has impacted you and what kind of coping strategies you've put in place to support you and Joe with that?
Oh, it was huge, Claire. It was actually looking back, it has been the single most biggest stumbling block. I would say we were cruising along nicely despite progression and Joe's limitations and all the sadness of all that, but yet living well and living a good life. And then suddenly COVID came. And prior to that, we lived near the town. Joe used to go to the shop by himself. He had his few items that he always would buy, not many, but just a few. And he'd go to customer service. They know him there. He shows his dementia card and they look after him. And then he had a neighbor who he'd pop across to and sit in his porch, and the two of them would have coffee and outings. He's hobby shopping. We would go to the city, we go to towns, we go away overnight, and part of all of that would be Joe and stocking up on the hobbies. So when COVID came, everything shut down in March, the end of March, and like Joe's environment changed. The shops, like a lot of his shops were closed, the coffee shops, and he didn't understand at all. He couldn't understand it. And even though the grocery shops were open, there were queues and they were only allowing so many people in, and you had to wait. And Joe didn't understand that. He didn't understand that you had to go and stand in the queue, and so I had to say to him, no, Joe, you have to wait. No, you can't go by yourself. And he just resisted completely. He did, and then his behavior changed. He started I wouldn't say he was aggressive, but really he went into a frenzy. He just needed money. Where was the money? It was just so much harder to pacify him or reassure him. I would always be reassuring. I couldn't reassure him. So I didn't know how to handle that. He was really not himself at all. And sometimes when he would choose something, at other times I'd offer an alternative and he'd be happy with, but there was no alternative. So he has a very good neurologist, and I just decided I would email her and she'd call me back. She understood perfectly what Joe was experiencing, and she tried him on a new medication. He had never been on medication in the morning because these were daytime behaviors. So she put him on something for the morning, and it did level out the obsessiveness. And as well as that, I said to her, we had a 5 kilometer restriction, and like going for a drive, like Joe would love his days out, even though we wouldn't go to a town, he'd go to his home place where he grew up, or he'd go to where he worked, and all those things kept up it stimulated him. And because of the 5K, we couldn't do this. And I said to her, is there any way we could get an exemption? Because I couldn't see the logic. Joe was deteriorating, and yet we were doing no harm to anybody by going in the car. We would take a flask, we would have coffee, a picnic on our way. And she wrote me a letter to say that it was important that Joe be exempt from the 5K rule. So we had that going forward, and anytime we were stopped, and we had been stopped, the police were quite understanding. So it gave us great flexibility to build our life and continue living, the way we were. So she was amazing, and I'm forever grateful to her. So yeah.
I think that, it's so important that people have that understanding, particularly with people with FTD, that these restrictions are very difficult to understand. And I think it's fantastic that you looked out for that support, and that you've got that in place to help kind of lift those restrictions a little bit for you and for Joe as well.
Mm-hmm.
And just to finish off, Brady, is there anything else that you feel is important for other carers to know or to have an awareness of?
I suppose from the beginning of Joe's diagnosis, for him, I knew, because he had insight into his condition for quite a long time, and I knew what a loss making his own decisions, his choices in life. He loved to travel, and he loved his job too. And I knew, like, all those things taken away from him were huge, and a huge loss. And so I think really to remember that they still have choices, that even though life is limited and ever changing, of course, that no matter, every day there are desires. It's human nature. And really, I feel really by recognizing that and validating, however, in whatever capacity, I think that gives a sense, it certainly does in Joe's case, a sense of that, validate that him as a person. And I think that has kept him living well. That and reassurance. I think reassuring him, you know, well done, you know, this is really good, you know, you're great, you know, all of those things. And telling him I love him. And I think all of that creates the kind of environment that's conducive to well-being, really, for all of us, you know.
Absolutely. So, Brady, thank you so much for beautifully explaining the strategies, the support, and specifically the empowerment that you provide for Joe. And it's been an absolute privilege on my end to be able to talk to you today and to hear more about your strategies of working with Joe to build a life with FTD. So thank you so much.
Well, a huge thank you from me, and I'm sure from all of you to Brady and Claire for that conversation. Really striking, really moving. I was really struck by the balance Brady seems to have steered between, you know, what's not possible and what remains possible, and particularly struck by the beginning of the conversation, that notion of profound moments. I'm sure that is something that will ring true for a lot of you. For those of you for whom dementia is relatively new to your life, you'll still be remembering those profound moments where something struck you, and then suddenly the dawning reality of a recognizable pattern behind that moment. But for everyone as well, even if you've been living with dementia for a long time, those notion of new profound moments of new losses and challenges, but also of profound moments of pleasure, of clarity, and of meaning. So thank you so much again, Brady, for sharing those. And you'll have a chance to speak further with Brady later on. She'll be on the panel. And if you have any comments or questions or just reflections on her story, things that have rung true in what she has said for you, or different experiences that you'd like to share, please feel free to do so in the question box. It doesn't necessarily have to be a question. If you just want to make a comment that you'd like me or one of the others to read out, then we'd be only too pleased to do so. So now it's my pleasure to reintroduce Nikki in conversation with her great friend Elaine, and hearing a little bit more about what has been a profound change for many people, the recent chapter in our lives of COVID, and also of changing home circumstances and care homes, and the opportunities and challenges that presents. So without further ado, over to Nikki and Elaine.
Good morning. It's fantastic to be here this morning with you all, and I'm delighted to introduce our speaker for this morning. We have the lovely Elaine Eager, who is one of RDS members, very valued of RDS membership, as you all are, and we're really pleased that Elaine is going to come and speak today about her experience through the sort of COVID-19 time, especially regards to care homes. So good morning, Elaine.
Good morning, Nikki, and thank you for inviting me.
Brilliant. So if we can just start off for today, if you could give us a little bit of background about yourself and Paul, your lovely husband.
Yeah, my husband Paul is 63 years old and he had his diagnosis in 2013. That diagnosis was logopenic primary progressive aphasia. Now, unfortunately, he lives in a care home and he has been there for the last 16 months. But before that, he stayed at home all the time and we kept a normal as possible life up until that point.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Elaine. Now, I've known you and Paul for a long time, and you're both really sort of social human beings and, you know, really enjoy having lots and lots of fun. Have you managed to keep that going with Paul being in a care home?
Before lockdown, yes, we did manage. We still went out for long walks, coffee and cake, bike rides, especially with the grandchildren. And yeah, we just had fun, and I would bring them home and we would still have friends round. Yeah, it was just trying to keep it as normal as possible and doing everything that he liked to do. So it was good. We did manage.
That's lovely to hear, and really, especially with the part of the bigger family as well, being really sort of part of that. And I know how much Paul did enjoy being in the sort of full of it with all the company around him. So it's great that you could manage to do that. Now, obviously in March this year, we saw sort of the first lockdown with COVID-19, and this year now had a real impact on people, but especially for people in care homes. Can you share a bit of the experience of what this was like for you both?
Just before lockdown, I had to go to Scotland as my father was ill and he passed away. So when I came back to London, it was lockdown. And I saw Paul through the glass of a window, but that was no good because he didn't really recognise me physically, and he always recognised my voice. I don't know why. I think it must have something to do with my accent. But that didn't work. So then I didn't see him for 6 months, and then I was allowed to see him in the care home garden, and it was a complete and utter shock. They brought out this old man who was shuffling, had lost lots of weight, and because of the type of dementia, his communication is now non-existent now. He wouldn't stay with me. He didn't know who I was at all, didn't recognise my voice. So that visit lasted 4 minutes. Then he was taken back inside. I was absolutely devastated. I thought I couldn't go back, I can't do this again. But then I just thought, actually, yeah, you can. So I arranged another visit for a couple of days later, and that one lasted 5 minutes. So it was an improvement. But still, he was a bit sort of, you know, not aware of who I was. But yeah, it was hard.
It sounds really, really difficult, and I think a lot of people in sort of the same situation when people in care homes can appreciate that sort of what's happening and how difficult it has been for families. But you have maintained a really good relationship with the care homes, which can be really difficult for people. Can you tell us a little bit how you've managed to do that?
Yes, I have. I think they know me as quite a positive person, and my motto is if you don't ask, you don't get. So I'm always on at them and asking questions and everything. And I've got to say that staff have been absolutely fantastic throughout lockdown. They've kept me informed. They've made little cards with photographs of Paul in it. They've written little words in it telling what he's been doing. They've posted it to me. They've called me, given me an update. Yeah, they've been absolutely fantastic. I've got no worries about the care that he's receiving or that he has received during lockdown.
That's brilliant. That's so positive, and it is having that open communication is really key. And yeah, I really like that. If you don't ask, you don't get. And if you don't ask the questions of what's happening, you won't know what's going on. So
exactly.
I think wise words for people, definitely ask the questions.
Yeah, and it doesn't really matter if you think it's a stupid question. No question is stupid. You know, if something's bothering you and you're not too sure, just ask. They can only look at you as if you're mad and then think she's off her rocker. But yeah, just ask.
Brilliant. It is, yeah. Like you said, no question is a stupid question. Now, we've seen the reports on the TV constantly and in the papers about residents being socially isolated through sort of this pandemic, and we know, you know, the effects of that. But carers can be socially isolated as well, can't they? And you know, has that been a big effect on you?
It was to begin with, because, well, Paul's in the care home. My eldest daughter lives in Guildford. My youngest daughter was away at university. She came home from university and went straight to her sister's because her sister needed somebody to look after her children because she continued to work. So I did most of lockdown on my own. So it was hard, but in saying that, I've got really, really good friends that live just around the corner, and we were always chatting to each other every day, and we had some sort of social gathering, be it out in the open air on our hours exercise or via Zoom, WhatsApp, video. So yeah, it wasn't too bad in the end. We could have a cup of coffee together over the video, or a glass of Prosecco, depending on the time of day.
Absolutely. It's, you know, you have to sort of reinvent things, don't you, and try as much as you can to keep yourself going. Now, I think really I can really quite honestly say that you are one of the most inspirational people that I've actually ever spoke to, and always full of advice. So do you have any advice, any coping strategies for people that are listening today, especially now we have gone into our second lockdown and we're going to see more restrictions coming into place?
I think what has got me through the last 10 years, 10, 11 years, is having a sense of humour. I try to find something positive in absolutely everything, because if I don't, I know that I will just go downhill, and my mental health would suffer, and physically as well. And another thing is just go with the flow. You can't change what is happening. So not only has the person living with dementia got to adapt their way of life, as a carer, you've got to adapt as well, and you've got to adapt your whole life. So you're adapting yourself, you're adapting the ways that you've got to look after that other person. So, you know, and give yourself a break. Don't feel guilty. Try not to beat yourself up about it. You're all doing a fantastic job. And it's the hardest job in the world, to look after someone that you love.
Full of wise words and inspiration for everybody, and really helpful. And I think it is, you know, having that sense of humour and keeping yourself going, and, you know, giving yourself those breaks. It's so important for a carer to sort of recognise that they do need support as well. So thank you. Thank you for your wise words this morning, and you're going to be joining us on the Q&A panel as well today. So if anybody has any questions specifically for Elaine, please send them through. Again, thank you again, Elaine.
You're welcome. Thank you again for inviting me.
Absolute privilege that was to interview Elaine and to get her story of what's been happening this year. I really hope this will be sort of helpful to you out there, and please remember that the direct support team are here to answer any of your questions, not just while we're here online today, but anytime. So please get in contact. And without further ado, I am going to hand you straight over to my wonderful team. So we've got with us today Livy and Hannah and Trish to talk about the updates and what we've been doing at the direct support team. So welcome to you all.
Hello everyone, it's lovely to be speaking to you all today. As you can imagine, we would much rather be looking at your lovely faces today as opposed to our screens, and we're really excited to see everybody again in person when it's safe to do so. To introduce myself for those who I've not had the pleasure of speaking to, I'm Olivia, or Livy, and I'm part of the ever-growing direct support team. And today I'm going to be introducing you to some of our newer staff members, Hannah, who is our newly appointed Admiral Nurse, and Trish, who is our Rights and Entitlement support worker. First, just to say, living with a rare form of dementia at any time brings everyday challenges for the person and for those around them. Coronavirus is making daily life much harder. You may feel anxious, scared, or lonely, but you're not alone. Help and support is available through the direct support team. As of last week, we have a total of 2,084 members signed up to Rare Dementia Support, and this is from around the world. This number includes people who have a diagnosis, their family members, friends, and also healthcare professionals who've come to us directly for support and advice for people with a rare type of dementia. And this number is increasing. So what can the direct support team do? So we can provide you with post-diagnostic and person-centered support, along with information and advice about rare dementia. So things like navigating the healthcare system, getting a formal diagnosis, helping people understand their diagnoses, so things like common symptoms. We can also signpost you to relevant services, and this assists greatly with care planning, and we can guide you to appropriate local help. During the coronavirus pandemic, we also have advice and practical tips for people living with dementia and for those supporting them, either in the same household or from a distance. We can offer confidential support via email, telephone call, or through an online video call platform called GoToMeeting that's a lot like Zoom. And if you think either yourself or your loved one would benefit from this, please contact us at contact@raredementiasupport.org. Now, I'm going to hand over and introduce you to some of our new members. Firstly, to introduce Hannah, who is our newly appointed Admiral Nurse.
Hello everyone, it's lovely to be part of the Rare Dementia Support team and to even speak to you even over the sort of situation. Unfortunately I can't see your faces, but it's nice to come and talk about my new role as an Admiral Nurse at the Rare Dementia Support team. My background is I've been an Admiral Nurse for 3 years. I worked in a hospital environment as the Admiral Nurse there, and I've got a real passion for dementia. Unfortunately I lost my own mum to young onset dementia, and has a real enlightened a lot of passion in me to improve care and support for carers, especially living with dementia. Admiral nursing is really about supporting the whole family, and my role at the Rare Dementia Support team is quite a unique Admiral Nurse role, and it's focusing on certain areas that you might need support in, and focusing on sort of complex needs, helping with interventions that might help to care for someone with dementia, advice, talking through situations, especially if someone's committed in hospital, and giving you support there. And every sort of family is unique, and it's about supporting you through each of those stages, but also really focusing on the middle to late stages, which can bring its own challenges. And it's about recognising loss and grief that you might feel, and having that Admiral Nurse to talk to, and we can work through the situations together. And also with the role, it's also about educating other Admiral Nurses about what the service and support is available at the Rare Dementia Support team, so they can tell people around the UK to come and register with the Rare Dementia Support team, get the support. And there's so many different services that team offer, but the Admiral Nurse is really focusing on the complex and middle to late stages. So please get in contact if you feel you need support, and we'll be happy to help you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Hannah. It's so amazing to have you part of the team. And now over to Trish, who is our Rights and Entitlement support worker.
Hello, I'm Trish O'Hara, and I'm new to RDS. And what I will say is I'm very excited to be part of an extremely niche team that can really offer lots of support that overlaps, and we all help each other, hopefully help you. And what I think when I think of rights as an entitlement, well, I would argue that when you're diagnosed with dementia, you have a right to push for a full diagnosis. Quite often people with diagnosis of dementia go home just knowing it's dementia but knowing very little else. And actually there's a lot of complex potential diagnosis that you could learn about. And I think one thing we can think about is how you get a decent diagnosis or a more complex diagnosis that will take you further into a treatment plan. And also thinking about what you're entitled to. Well, you're entitled to get it wrong, you're entitled to feel like you can't do it on your own, and you're entitled to fail at this, and you're entitled to ask for help. You know, sometimes people will say that love is not always enough at the stages of dementia where you need support. And I'm somebody who's worked and professionally and personally cared for people with dementia, right from healthcare services within home care and residential care. So I'm hoping that I'll be of use to help you navigate what can be a very difficult and complicated system. Thank you. Looking forward to meeting you somewhere or other. Bye.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for joining us today. And yeah, amazing additions to the team. And again, for everybody out there, if you think either yourself or your loved one would benefit from contacting us, whether you've got any questions or you'd like to arrange a support call with us, then please do feel free to email us. Our email address again is contact@raredementiasupport.org. That's contact@raredementiasupport.org. Lovely. Thank you all for listening.
Great. Well, thank you to you all for all those wonderful pre-recorded contributions. Really moving and inspiring in equal measure. So if I can now take the opportunity to invite the rest of the panelists up on to join me up on the screen, that'd be great. We've had a number of questions in already, but I'd encourage any of you listening out there in the ether to please keep those questions coming. No, we definitely have a rule of any question is allowed. It might be, but also statements and comments and reflections. So those might be positive, they might be negative. Please don't worry. Please don't feel any need to self-edit. We're happy for you to put anything to us. And what we tend to do in these large group meetings is to answer the questions we have time for now, and then to arrange a further session with the panelists to pick up on any questions. So if you sent in a question and we don't get to speak about it now, my apologies, but we haven't forgotten about you, and there will be a sort of post-session continued Q&A that we'll then share with you via a video link after today. So thank you very much to Nikki, Trish, Ida, Elaine and Brady for joining me back on the screen. And I thought we would kick off with a question for, I guess, initially Trish, but I'm sure Nikki and any of the rest of you, please do feel free to comment as well. So someone has asked, I've been told that care homes lose out on fees if you're a privately funded resident who then receives continuing healthcare funding, and that they might be reluctant to assist with the assessment process because of this. Is this correct? If so, is it possible to pay top-up fees on CHC funding? So a bit of a thorny, challenging one. I hope it's okay to throw that over to you, Trish, to start us off.
Yeah, I think so. It's a not entirely straightforward answer. It's not a yes and no answer, really. There is a no, you cannot top up on CHC funds. That's unlawful. You can't top up on CHC funds, but it's not left there. Now, of course, if you're a self-funder in a care home that's expensive, then that does have an impact on whether the care home's going to get the full amount. But not everything that the person who lives in the care home is asking for is a primary healthcare need. So there's a way that you can separate and get joint funding potentially, particularly for specialisms that wouldn't be considered a health need, because the CHC funding is assessed around someone's primary health care, and that's very specific. It should cover the whole care plan. That's the ideal. The whole care plan. Having said that, what CHC have to consider is that the CCGs, the clinical commissioning groups, they have to look at preference. They have to balance this off. Preference, suitability, and they also have to look at cost. So they have to be evidencing that they're using monies well. So they will, and CCGs will do this. They will check other care homes in the area and do a comparable. You know, if this care home is extremely expensive, they will be looking at what the difference is too huge. Now, of course, when we think about the sorts of things that somebody might live in a particular care home for, is one of the big things to consider is proximity. We can start thinking about somebody being close to their family, the right to family life, and that the family need to visit, or the person who needs to visit. At time of COVID, that's more difficult, but nonetheless, the person needs to visit, or specific needs that only that care home can provide, like culturally specific, maybe having staff who speak their primary language or their first language, something very specific that that care home can offer that can't be offered in other care homes. That would be very important to try and decipher. It's true the care home might be a bit reluctant if they feel they're not going to make the full fee, and you can't top up the CHC, but you can consider, and the care home can, excuse me, I'm sorry, consider pushing for a local authority assessment around the other needs that aren't primary care needs, and perhaps get a joint funding package. Having said that, there's also other area of money that you can look for, and a top-up is available. You can put a top-up in for lifestyle choices, such as a bigger room, ensuite, particular food needs, more expensive or particular costly part of your care. That can be topped up because it's not primary healthcare stuff. So it's not straightforward, it's very complicated, but it's worth pushing. There's also another bit of money there. If your loved one or the person that you in your family who doesn't qualify for CHC, they may not meet the target, but they might still have some health needs. If they're in a service that's also considered a nursing service somewhere, so care homes and nursing homes are slightly different, but many care homes will have a floor that will have a nursing qualified nurse. So it'll have a nursing sort of registered nurse. In that case, it's possible for your loved one to get a sort of weekly payment of about 183 quid. It's just a little bit over 183 quid, and that's a fixed amount. And that's potentially something that the care home can help you apply for, as long as they do have a nurse. It has to be supervised or managed by a nurse, even if your loved one doesn't live on the floor that's considered the nursing floor. So there are different things you can push for. It's not entirely straightforward, and I'm not sure I've given a direct answer, but hopefully I've given you some ideas.
Thanks so much, Trish. Nikki, anything you'd like to add to that? Oh, we can't hear you, I don't think. When these things happen, we have to remind ourselves, I think it was in a recent testimony to the US Senate, that Jeff Bezos, who runs Amazon.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Presenting. Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
I do apologise for that. The organiser muted me.
That's Nikki, that's the my dog ate my homework equivalent of excuse for these sorts of meetings. So
this happens quite a lot with my team.
It's at this point you cue me to say thank you to Alicia and Claire and many others behind the scenes who are helping us all come together. Nikki,
I think Trish's answer was absolutely fantastic. I mean, she really sort of covered everything sort of within that. I don't know whether Elaine has a husband in a care home, and I know she had a battle with continuing healthcare funding, so she may want to add to this.
Yeah, we didn't get the full package. We have the nursing care package though. And again, the nursing floor isn't the floor that my husband is on. So yeah, I can bear that out.
Thanks, guys. One little follow-up question which came in from someone else was about whether you can top up CHC funds if the care is in your own home.
Trish, do you want to answer that? You are expert on CHC.
No, I don't know if I'm necessarily an expert on CHC. I've never applied for it myself, and I'm sure Elaine has. Now, you're talking about people being cared for in their own home for CHC funds, with CHC funding. It would be possible, it's an exceptional circumstance, there's case law that's helped with this. Because CHC funding's about healthcare, arguably, how they usually want to see it is in a service where there's a nurse. It's managed by a nurse, because that would meet the healthcare standards, if you like. But there has been, and there will be, continuing pushing that people could get equally efficient and good care, and in fact more superior care within the case law. The case is called the Poynton case. It was 2003, Poynton, P-O-I-N-T-O-N. And it's worth sort of mentioning case law for people if you're arguing for having someone at home with CHC, because that case decided, the outcome was that whilst the family weren't nurses, it was decided that they could manage the healthcare at home with community health, community nurses coming in, you know, perhaps the community team, such as a sort of health visitor or a local community nurse, and the GP. It was managing the healthcare in the community, and it was decided in that case that the care that the person would get would be superior to that of a care home. So it is possible to fight for it, but it ain't straightforward. It's an exceptional circumstance, and you have to push around things like specific, again, similar to what I said before. If you feel that your loved one or the person that you're supporting is someone who needs to be at home because of very specific needs, such as communication, I would go for communication, maybe fighting on the right of family life again. Perhaps that person is extremely challenging and is likely to become violent to themselves or others and hurt people, whereas if they're at home, they might be less violent, less angry. If this you could fight, it wouldn't be straightforward, and it's a bit case by case, really. It's not a block standard answer, but you would fight on the right of an exceptional circumstance and use the Poynton case to help you out. Cheers.
Thank you, Trish. That's really helpful, and we'll also speak to a couple of other questions of people coming in who've also in a similar situation of having part-time or full-time care at home, and to whom that might be relevant. So thank you for that. A little bit of a change of tack. I wondered if I could come over to you, Ida. One of the questions in from one of the people listening is there any one common connection between different types of dementia? So obviously, as this carer meeting, we have our specific groups for people with FTD, for PCA, for PPA, etc. But only one common connection between all the different types of dementia.
Thank you, Seb. Can you all hear me well? I'm testing. All right. So yes, different dementias have actually different pathophysiological processes underlying the cognitive decline. This means that the reason why the brain cells get sick and die are different for different dementia types. So they are different brain diseases, and the changes they produce in the brain are also different. Having said this, they also share many commonalities in the way these diseases express themselves through the symptoms they produce. This is through the changes that you can see in the person. Common symptoms to all kinds of dementia are, for instance, difficulties with processing information or difficulties with communication, decision-making, or changes in behavior and psychological aspects, like depression or anxiety or irritability.
Great, thank you, Ida. That's really helpful. Just on that theme, I'm just going to segue on to Nikki, if that's okay. A question has been in about what medications are available for rare dementia. So obviously the question is sort of broken down as Ida just explained into the fact that there are different causes of these different rare dementias. But I wonder if you could just touch on what medications are available for people with not just Alzheimer's disease, but other conditions who may be here.
Well, firstly, it's really important that people do get the subtype of dementia, and this is definitely important because of medications. So people that have Alzheimer's disease or have atypical Alzheimer's disease, so that is logopenic aphasia, which Elaine's husband has, which affects his speech, and posterior cortical atrophy, PCA, which affects people's vision. These are both atypical Alzheimer's disease. They can then have the drugs which people with Alzheimer's disease have. So these are generally donepezil, rivastigmine or galantamine, and there's another drug as well called memantine. Now, normally the donepezil is the first drug that's quite often offered to people because it's the cheapest drug. And if people have trouble with that medication, sometimes people get stomach upset, they will often be offered rivastigmine instead, because it can come in patches and it's slow release, so it does help with side effects. However, not everybody is suitable for them. Some people don't get on with them. If people have slow heart rates, then it's not going to be suitable. If they take the drugs, they would probably fall over as soon as they stand up. So it's really important that people are assessed for their health needs before given these medications. And quite often, if they can't take, they can't have donepezil, they will be given memantine straight away. Some people are put on donepezil first of all, and then at later stage they're put on memantine. Now these obviously are the medications for Alzheimer's disease and atypical Alzheimer's disease. There aren't any medications for frontotemporal dementia, and actually if the diagnosis is wrong and people with FTD are given the Alzheimer's disease medications, it can cause them some problems. It can cause them to be much more anxious, it can cause depression, and it could cause irritability in people. So it's really, really important. So if you are on it, if your loved ones are on some medication, please sort of check that it's the right medication for them. Obviously, there's a lot of research going into medications at the moment, and looking for that magic pill, and nothing's coming out at the moment. But there is, we are hopeful. There are things going on. But sort of for people with FTD and PPA, quite often there will be medications to help with sort of other symptoms to go along with that. Really sort of depression and anxiety. So it's always a really good thing to speak to your GP or your consultant if there are any concerns about medications.
Wonderful, thank you, Nikki. And the rest of the panel, please do feel free to wave at me at any point if you would like to add anything to anything anyone else offers in response to any of these questions. Next, I wanted to come over to you, Brady, if that's okay. One comment and one question. The comment is very, very lovely. It says, someone has said, not a question, but the house behind Brady is amazing. And I'm assuming it's creation and it's inspiring. Is that right, Brady? Is that one of Joe's?
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It comes in a flat pack, and he breaks off all the pieces and he follows the diagrams, and yeah, he has quite a lot of this.
Fabulous.
Thank you for saying. Yeah.
And Brady, the question from someone else was about how old Joe was when he was diagnosed, and how did he manage with giving up work and telling friends?
In 2013, Joe was 55. Initially, he didn't want to tell people. It took about a year. It took the process anyway for diagnosis, took about a year, but we knew he was aware of dementia. He had a fear of Alzheimer's because he was familiar with Alzheimer's, I guess. So initially, when he got the frontotemporal diagnosis, it didn't seem as devastating for him. He was able to, it softened it. And giving up work, I think, was a bit of relief, in that it was so, he was putting himself, it wasn't that he was under undue pressure, it's just the nature of the disease. He was putting himself under enormous pressure. And even when he's doing his models, he still has to accomplish the task, and he's rushing. And it takes the joy out of so much of life for him. So for us to make the decision, I think it was relief. I think there was an element of relief. And then I took time out and we started doing fun things. And that brought some positivity, I think, the transition, yeah.
Thank you, Brady. It's really helpful to hear that. And obviously people have such different experiences with finishing work. sometimes getting to make the choice themselves, but often other people feeling that it's been taken out of their hands, and a much less satisfying or conducive way of finishing what's often been a lifetime of employment. So I'm glad that it was something of a relief for Joe. Thank you. Elaine, could I possibly come to you next? Well, a few people have asked a few questions about the decision about when Paul went into a care home, and particularly some questions around what prompted it, and whether it was a kind of clear and specific decision based on one moment or one change, or whether it was a collection of things that moved you to the point where as a family you decided that was the right thing.
Right at the very beginning, when Paul and I had a discussion about his future care, what he wanted to go into a care home at the end because he didn't want to burden me. We have a do not resuscitate in place, and that prompted the move into a care home, because I was out one day and my neighbour was looking after him, and I hadn't said about the do not resuscitate, and Paul had a massive epileptic fit and had to be resuscitated. He was taken to hospital, and from the hospital a few days later it was decided that the best place for him was the care home, so he never came home again. So that decision was sort of shortened. It was brought forward, I think, by the epileptic fit. But it would always have got to the stage where I would have adhered to what Paul wanted, and he would have gone into a care home. Although that wasn't my decision, I wanted to keep him at home for the whole time, but I had to go with what he wanted.
Thank you, Elaine. It's so helpful to hear the sort of some of the complexity behind that, not just in terms of what were the kind of physical prompts or the events that triggered it, but also those different opinions, and how you weigh up how to respect someone's wishes against what's best for you as an individual and you as a family and a couple. That's really, really helpful to hear. Thank you. Trish and Nikki, I just wondered if there's anything else that would be helpful for you to share on that. I'm sure you've both spoken with people who have made very varying decisions, for some whom have been very much of one mind about when or what is the right change to make, and other people for whom it's been a much more divisive issue.
You want to start, Trish?
Yeah, I'm happy to come in. I mean, I've had to make this decision in my own family, so it is a really difficult decision. And it's important, I think, probably for me to say that sometimes when we want to care for someone at home, we don't have the expertise and we're too worried. And I think Elaine's story there is a really important one, is the fact that, you know, sometimes the health needs are too much and we don't want to be able to be responsible for those health needs. We don't have the skills or the confidence. And it's important for us to recognise when we're not coping, or when we're just not coping emotionally, because the person we're supporting is perhaps being really difficult to us, being mean or unkind, and bringing our relationship into a sort of crack. Whereas when they move into a care service, perhaps that relationship can be based on something different, visits that are a bit more pleasant, whereas somebody doesn't want to be washed and dressed by you, because that makes a different relationship, really. Perhaps if you'd had a relationship that was intimate and then you start bathing the person, maybe that person is humiliated and angry and takes it out on you. And maybe when you become the visitor in a care home, you can find intimacy again in a different way. And so I think it's important to accept that a care home is sometimes very needed and very necessary, and many of them are wonderful.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate that many of them are absolutely wonderful. We have lots of conversations with people about when is the right time, and lots of people differ on this as well. Personal experiences, I had to make that decision with my own father, who had young onset Alzheimer's disease, and he went into a care home when my mother couldn't look after him any longer. He was really quite aggressive. It was quite dangerous for her at home. He was doubly incontinent. He had severe needs that, you know, one person couldn't look after. It doesn't matter if it was my mother, even if he was in a care home and one person was looking after him, it wouldn't be able to sustain that. Care home has a whole team of people to look after, so that pressure isn't on that one person. And a lot of people do settle into care homes really well. You have so many things to cater for all their needs. It's a whole team of skills that are there. And, you know, essentially people are in there for nursing needs because they have very severe nursing needs that, you know, other diseases people would be in a hospice or in a hospital for. So you really have to accept that. And as Trish said, there are some wonderful care homes. I've seen some brilliant care homes, and I'm going to be putting my name down for a few of them for 20 years time to make sure I've got my place there. So but it is a very difficult decision for families to make, and you know, we are more than happy to talk through those queries with people.
Thank you both, really helpful. Ida, I wondered if I could just come to you briefly for a comment. Both Trish and Nikki there and Elaine stressed very positive relationships with nursing home and care homes. Obviously, care homes in the media have come in for a bit of a bashing. There have been some mixed messaging about, you know, who's behind the decisions, for example, to not allow visitors. And I know that you've been having conversations with organisations like John's campaign around the campaign to get relatives key worker rights and improved access to their loved ones. I just wondered if there's any comments or updates you'd like to make on that front.
Yes, so I think it is fair to acknowledge that there are many care homes that have been enabling visits and making a huge effort. And the majority have seen themselves really in a situation very difficult for enabling visits, and it's been impossible for many of them. Something that I think it is crucial is the fact that care homes are not places well prepared to deal with the pandemic. So they are places for communal living, they are houses. So they are really facing huge challenges. And in order to face those challenges successfully, they also need support. So many care homes just don't have the resources to enable visits or enable visitors in a safe way because maybe they don't have enough staff. The physical environment does not allow having visits in a safe way. So maybe they need to make physical modifications and they need funding to do that. So I think there are many challenges. It's not as simple as they don't allow visitors. It's that care homes in general need clear guidelines to enable visitors, but also many of them need support, like financial support, to hire more staff, to make physical changes in the facilities, to maybe also get more provision of PPE, because we need to remember that enabling visitors in these times requires infection control protocols, and this requires time and this requires more staff. So it's really challenging for care homes.
Thank you. Really helpful to have that sort of balanced view represented, which is sometimes difficult to get. So thank you. Ida, I wonder if we could stick with you. One of the questions that's come in is from someone who says, we live in a large house and are thinking whether we should downsize. My husband has lipopenic PPA and atypical Alzheimer's. What are your thoughts about moving house with this scenario? So maybe if you could just start by briefly saying, for those less familiar with these diagnoses, Ida, about what logopenic PPA is, and then any thoughts about that scenario of downsizing and moving, which I'm sure is a common kind of question and concern in a lot of people's minds, no matter what the diagnosis.
Logopenic aphasia is one of the three variants of primary progressive aphasia. So people with this kind of dementia, they don't have problems with their memory, but they have problems finding words and increasing problems with communication. And it is commonly associated to Alzheimer's disease. It is one of the atypical forms of Alzheimer's disease, although not always. So Alzheimer's disease pathology is not always the underlying problem, but it is in the majority of cases. So I think that if you have to move home, you have to move home. So life is about constant change, and life keeps going on with or without dementia. So it is likely that a person with dementia who changes environment will get more confused and disoriented, because people with cognitive difficulties find more challenging to adapt to new scenarios and to new environments. But they also have the capacity to adapt. It is just that it takes longer and they need more support. But people with dementia can adapt to new environments and new routines. If the person is in the earlier stages, will find it easier and will adapt quicker. And if it is in later stages, it will be more challenging. But what it is crucial here is to have realistic expectations and try to maintain the routines that have been established in the daily living of this person as stable as possible in the new house. And it is fine if the person is disoriented and confused during the first weeks. That is completely normal. It should not make anyone feeling frustrated or guilty. And the person will adapt progressively. What you can observe also is maybe a drop in function. But this is normal, because the person, if the person don't know where his clothes are anymore, won't be able to find them easily. So you can perceive this as difficulties with accomplishing daily tasks, but will probably adapt and get there. It's just that, again, I think it is very important to be realistic and be expecting this. So it doesn't come as a shock when the person feels more disoriented. It is normal that if you change environment and you are living with cognitive difficulties, it takes you a while to adapt and find your feet around.
Thank you, Ida. I think not just a great answer to that question, but such a great illustration of how so many questions people in this group will naturally have don't sadly have simple yes or no answers. But that's a kind of, rather than just frustrated by that, I think your answer about being clear on the expectations and where possible allowing us to help you with that as a team is so important, because we want RDS to be a place where we don't try and offer trite answers. We want to offer solutions and suggestions where they exist, but we know that there often aren't simple solutions, or at least not ones without consequences. And so having those sort of measured, balanced opinions and being able for us as a team to share and be informed by the differing experiences you all as members have is one of the many ways in which this has to be a team effort, us and you. Thank you so much. Talking about another question that doesn't have a yes or no answer, Brady, I wondered if I could come back to you, and then maybe for Elaine and others to join in. Someone in the group has asked Brady whether your husband's progression was fast or slow, and of course we all know that a lot of people very understandably and reasonably aren't wanting to ask those questions about what happens next, how long will it be. And so maybe you could say a little bit about your and Joe's experience about whether the progression has been fast or slow, or both.
I myself would describe it as slow, and in fact so slow that things happen, everyday things happen. Like he used to, because he couldn't follow things on television like drama and things he liked, he started watching animation movies. They were fun, he was able to follow them, and then he stopped watching. And same with looking at magazines, pictures, and then on reflection I would say, well, when did he stop doing that? So like day to day, things evolve with progression, and in such a way as it's almost happening unknown to, or quantifying it. So we are living with this 8 years. It's the month of November. We were November 2012 actually. And so I would say it has been exceptionally slow, like a drip, almost like a slow drip. I have plans, all the practical plans in place, but progression as future, I'm okay with it taking its course. I mean, intellectually, I would like to know the stages, but it's so individual. But I don't have to know really. So it's a day-by-day process. If that answers the question.
It does. It's a brilliant measured answer. Thank you, Brady, so much. Would anybody else like to come in on that? Trish.
Sorry, that's better. Yes, I think it's really important what you said, Brady, about the drip, and the change has been sort of so slow over a period of time. You don't always know what's been lost. And good advice, I think, when you're supporting someone at home for perhaps future needs, such as applying for exceptional circumstance for CHC funding, is to keep a diary, because also if you were applying for funding, they would ask you to prove that the person had needs in those areas, and a diary would be some proof. So keeping a diary for yourself, because you can see, well, actually they used to be able to read the book themselves and now they can't. That would be a really good way to show what's happened in their life and yours with them. And a diary is really helpful around creating evidence for any future requests for funding or help from the local authority, or indeed from CHC, from the CCGs. So it's important to keep a diary, I think, and we don't always think we have time to, or that it's important or there's enough happening, but it's what's not happening that we want to record, actually. And that's kind of an interesting journey, and the diary might be something for you to reflect on later on to see how things have gone. I think that's really important. And just coming quickly, if I'm allowed, I'm sorry, but around Ida talking about people moving, I think a really good thing is if you've got enough money, and obviously money's of importance here, if you are moving and you can afford it, or you have a carpenter in the house, a really good thing to do is to take the fronts out of, you know, kitchen cupboards, bedroom cupboards, bathroom cupboards, or replace them with open fronted perspex or plastic fronted or glass fronted, so that your person living with dementia can see where the cups are, can see where their socks are, can see where the books are, can see where their toothbrush is, so that things aren't put away. They're still in display, but they're not everywhere, so that the mess causes concern. They're still put away, but you can see through. That was just a little thing I wanted to add in. Be quiet now.
Can I just come in about Paul's progression? Slightly different to Brady. I found that it was more, you would have a plateau, and then we would have a dip, and then we would have another plateau, and then another dip. And it went along like this for quite a while. But because of the communication, the logopenic aspect, I did notice that his speech was the very first thing to go. And we live in a big house, and I thought about moving, but we had a Labrador at the time, and the dog was invaluable, because as Paul's memory started to go, the dog was able to take Paul for a walk. So the dog would take Paul to the park and bring him back. And we live in a small community, and all the neighbours, we've lived here for a long time, all the neighbours knew Paul, and I was still working at the time. And I said to them, can you look out for him? If you see him out without the dog, can you call me? Because then I know that he's going to get lost. And on one occasion, a neighbour called me and she said, oh, I've just seen Paul out for walking the dog. He's got the lead, but not the dog. So I had to come home from work. But that we didn't move in the end, because we live in such a small community, and it would have been too much. I think the change would have been too much for him. And again, if you do move, I would say future-proof your house. Make sure you've got a downstairs toilet, because in the end, Paul was finding it difficult to go up the stairs. We don't have a downstairs toilet. So it's just little things like that that I would say think about.
Thank you, Elaine, really helpful. As is often the case when we're doing these Q&As, we get near to the time when we need to let everybody go, which we're very conscious of wanting to hold to, but equally suddenly a little flurry of fascinating questions come in, and very much linked to the one we were just talking about progression, someone asking the very broad but absolutely critical question that I'm sure is on almost everybody's mind of how do you work out when you may need more help? So I think we probably don't have time to answer that or the remaining questions today, but we will answer them after the fact on video and send that round to you. And I think it's the short answer, I think, is not alone. We want to be with you, to talk with you, and to enable you to share with each other your experiences of how you have navigated those moments of change, those moments when you need more help, when something needs to shift, when you may need to move, touching on the conversation we've just been having. And I just encourage you to feel that you don't have to make those decisions all on your own. Even if you feel isolated, particularly at the moment, the direct support team are here to support you as best we can. We're keen to create opportunities to buddy you up with other people in a similar situation, to involve you in both small and large groups. And so please, please, please do not try and do this all by yourself. You're absolutely remarkable for what you've been doing. The stories of resilience and creativity that we've heard over lockdown, 2 lockdowns and a very difficult 9 months in total have been remarkable, but we know it's hard. So please, please feel free to reach out. And for those of you who don't feel you're able to, we completely understand that too. We will be trying to reach out more proactively to you. Some of you who haven't been in touch with any of us directly recently may be getting an email or a phone call in the coming weeks as we try and reach out to you, not to stick our noses in, but just to say, hi, can we help? Can we listen? And is there anything we can do to support you? So overall, thank you so much all for being here today. A huge thank you to all of our speakers and panelists. A huge thank you to the team behind the scenes who've been arranging the meeting, bringing you all in, facilitating the questions, and all that entails. But we, yes, sorry not to be with you in person now to offer you further tea and coffee and sandwiches and all the things that families and friends do. But for now, thanks so much, and we will see you again, I hope, before too long. Best wishes for now. I'm so sorry, I forgot to say there's a video coming.
Hello, my name is Eva Tate and I'm the Major Appeals Manager and Manager of the Rare Dementia Support Fund held by the charity the National Brain Appeal. The National Brain Appeal raises money as the dedicated charity for the National Hospital for Neurology and Neurosurgery and UCL Queen's Square Institute of Neurology. The National Brain Appeal raises funds for Rare Dementia supports 2,000 members to help individuals living with rare and early onset forms of dementia, their families, friends, and healthcare professionals. And we also hold several other funds for FTD and dementia research. The funding helps not only the support group meetings in London, but also the regional support groups, admin and support staff, and all other associated expenses, including the new online support groups. When things return to normal, there are travel and accommodation bursaries available to help members attend the meetings. This year, we've raised our fundraising target to 300,000, and this will rise further to 350,000 by 2022 to develop and extend the service in the areas of education, support, and research, with the ultimate aim that everyone affected by a form of rare dementia will have access to specialist information and support, as well as contact with other people with a similar condition. We apply for grants from grant-making trusts, foundations and livery companies and have a wonderful group of supporters, some of whom are here today, who fundraise for us in an amazing variety of ways. We would love it if you would like to sign up to our RDS fundraising newsletter to hear more of these stories and receive news of how we can support this community. We have had people do head shaves for us. We have had a gentleman drive across the Mongolian steppe in a VW Polo, and we have lots of people who take part in runs and virtual runs as well. At the end of February, we held a gala dinner called Mission Possible, where we raised 110,000 for the expansion of rare dementia support. And we are delighted to announce that in line with this expansion, the charity is committed to raise up to 7 million to create the world's first centre of excellence for rare dementias. If anyone would like to discuss any fundraising ideas or the new capital appeal, please do feel free to email me or my colleague Alexis, our Senior Fundraising Manager, who will speak about the innovative new ways you can be involved in fundraising for RDS, even during this challenging time. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Alexis Gebby and I'm the Senior Fundraising Officer at the National Brain Appeal. I just want to start off by saying a huge thank you to all of you who already fundraise for RDS. We really appreciate all of your incredible efforts, especially at this difficult time. My role at the National Brain Appeal is to look after all the amazing people taking on various fundraising activities for us. We have had people challenging themselves to run marathons, cycle long distances, climb mountains, and even take on skydives, all whilst raising money for RDS. We also have wonderful fundraisers out in the community who organise golf days, hold coffee mornings, host choir and carol concerts, and even shave their heads. These people ensure that more people like you can be supported through Rare Dementia Support. If you're interested in becoming one of our fundraising heroes, then please do contact me. I am here to support you with your fundraising and I'm more than happy to chat about any ideas that you may have. While at the moment it isn't possible to take part in a sporting challenge or hold a big fundraising gathering in your local community, we do have some fundraising ideas, such as taking on a solo virtual run or walk, hosting a quiz for your friends or family online, asking for birthday donations in lieu of going out, or even donating money that you may be saving by not travelling to work or buying your daily coffee. Do get in touch with me if you would like to get involved. In the meantime, take care and we hope to see you soon.